Welcome, everybody, to NFL Fantasy Game Day presented by Geico. I am Adam Rank. That is Kimmy Checks. That is Marcus Grant over there. Kimmy, how you living?
I'm so good. Happy Sunday, guys. Week 13. We're here. One more week until we have the fantasy playoffs. Let's get it. Marcus, happy Sunday. How are you?
Happy Sunday, everybody. Yeah, I just finished shoving some bagels and sausage in my face, so that's pretty good. I got a cup of coffee. It's last call for the playoffs, so shout out to everybody who's in. Good luck to everybody who needs a win and maybe some help to get in. I guess that's what we're here for. We should probably do our jobs, huh?
Did it surprise you that we had a show today and you had to throw down some food at the last second? But hey,
no, I
well,
just
maybe you're doing that with
procrastinate with my breakfast thing on Sundays.
Apparently. All right. Well, hopefully you're not procrastinating on your fantasy lineups because obviously the playoffs start next week, and we are happy to answer any questions that you have. Hit us up on Twitter at NFL Fantasy. We will try to get to as many of those questions as possible. And of course, as always, our friend, our pal, Michael F. Florio is in the comments section of YouTube at youtube.com/NFL. You can answer him questions directly. And as a special bonus today, he's not wearing floral, so he's not going to be on the show. So he's just going to be answering questions. He's not going to be allowed on these. No, he'll be allowed. He'll be here. But let's get to some of the news that's been trickling out over the last couple of days. And we will start with with the reigning MVP. Our own Ian Rappaport said today the Ravens expect quarterback Lamar Jackson to come off the COVID-19 list and play Tuesday, while there doesn't seem to be much concern for Big Ben, who hasn't practiced. So, if Lamar Jackson returns, remember that game is on Tuesday. Marcus, would you be dialing him up in your lineup?
I feel okay with putting Lamar back in there. I know he hasn't been, obviously, we've talked about it. He hasn't been the guy that people thought they were getting when they spent probably a third-round draft pick on him. Let that be a lesson to you. But he's been okay. And against the Cowboys, I think he's going to figure out a way to get it done, whether it's with his arm or with his legs. Plus, the Ravens need him. The Ravens need a win, and so they're going to need him to play big, so I feel okay about it.
Wait, Marcus, he wasn't a third-round guy. In NFL.com leagues, he's drafted in the second round, second quarterback off the board behind Patrick Mahomes. You think you're not going to go ahead and start the guy you drafted second overall? Obviously, we know the production has not been as consistent as he was last year when he was the MVP, but it's a favorable matchup. I think he's ready for a bounce back, so go ahead and fire up Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, I agree. You got to get him back into the lineup. And another guy who was drafted highly, perhaps first overall in your fantasy leagues, Alvin Kamara. Now, over the first 10 weeks of the season, he was the RB1. Ever since Taysom Hill has taken over as the quarterback, he has been the RB41, which matches the number on his jersey. So, Kimmy, let me ask you, are you starting Alvin Kamara this week?
You have to. It would be silly not to start Alvin Kamara, but I think we all understand now that we kind of have to temper our expectation with Taysom Hill being the starting quarterback for the Saints. Now, the reality is that it's a favorable matchup against the Atlanta Falcons, right? Division rivalry game. It's a fun matchup. They just played each other 2 weeks ago. The Falcons are allowing the 6th most total yards per game this season. So if Alvin Kamara, by some chance, does get the ball from Taysom Hill, finally he should be ready and able to explode.
I'm putting him in my lineup, and I'm worried about it. Don't get me wrong. With what we've seen out of Taysom Hill, it makes me concerned, the fact that in 2 games, Alvin Kamara has just 3 targets, which is such a big part of his game that has been missing. But one, I feel like with the Falcons having seen Taysom Hill at quarterback a couple of weeks ago, they can sort of retool and regroup. Plus, their defense actually has been playing better. I think for the Saints, it is about sort of doing something different and getting Kamara involved more as a pass catcher, because I just don't think they can roll out that same game plan they had 2 weeks ago and think they're going to be successful again.
Yeah, that's the big thing, is Sean Payton's going to have a different way to attack this Falcons defense, which, as you said, has been playing very well over the last couple of weeks. But let's take a turn now to take a look at the injury report and kind of see some of the big names who are both active and inactive. Let's start with the guys who are active. We've got Matthew Stafford. He is active. Tua Tagovailoa is active and expected to start expected to start for the Dolphins this week. Not against the Dolphins, for the Dolphins this week against the Cincinnati Bengals. Dalvin Cook, Todd Gurley, who missed last week, will be back against the New Orleans Saints. David Johnson is back. Some of the inactives, though, big names. DeAndre Swift is one who he came off the concussion protocol and practiced on Wednesday, but did not practice the other 2 days. So, of course, he is going to be inactive today. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, late game on Sunday, game time decision. Kenny Golladay, inactive. But good news, Julio Jones is back. Allen Robinson is going to be playing. Adam Thielen is going to be playing once again for the Minnesota Vikings. But 2 tight ends are not going to be playing, Irv Smith Jr. and Jonnu Smith. So we will have some tight end replacements for you. But one of the names that stood out to me, and Kimmy, let me ask you this question. David Johnson has been out for a couple of weeks. Now he returns going up against the Indianapolis Colts, a team last week that was gashed by by King Henry. So how do you feel about David Johnson this week?
Well, I think Derrick Henry, David Johnson, a little bit different in terms of quality running backs. David Johnson, though, I do feel good about starting him. He's a solid RB2 play because of that typical high volume that he sees in this offense when he is healthy. It's on 17 touches a game in 7 full games, which is insane. I do think that Duke Johnson will now take a back seat and only have value as a handcuff. But in terms of David Johnson, I do feel fine about starting him if you need help at running back.
Josh Jacobs is another running back who will not be playing this week, and he's got a great match. The Raiders have a great matchup against the Jets. So, Marcus, let me ask you, Devontae Booker, is it as simple as getting him into the lineup?
I think if you need RB2 help, I think I would play Devontae Booker, but I wouldn't just necessarily plug him in and expect that it's going to be kind of a one-to-one production with what you got out of Josh Jacobs. I mean, I think some of the guys that I would start over him. I mean, certainly a guy like Nyheim Hines, for instance. David Montgomery definitely against the Lions would be starting over him. I would probably play a guy like Damian Harris over him. I think he's more along the lines of what you can expect, say, out of a Carlos Hyde, who'll probably be splitting some snaps with Chris Carson there for the Seahawks.
Well, hopefully Josh Jacobs will return next week as the fantasy playoffs roll on. And time now for 15 for 15 presented by Geico. And that can only mean one thing. It's Sunday Fun Day! Let's start going over some of our top starts for the week, and we'll start at the quarterback position. If we can roll that animation, roll that board, and see. You know what? When I do start them, sit them now, I've kind of changed it. I give you 7 to 8 quarterbacks because, you know what? The quarterback position is so deep. And even if you're rolling out the quarterback 15 or 16, you're still starting a pretty good quarterback. Now, Deshaun Watson, Justin Herbert, got a lot of questions about them this week. I'm very comfortable starting them. Cam Newton is playing in a little bit of a later game, so that's a dicier situation. I still like him this week. Baker Mayfield might not be your particular brand of vodka. I like him, but if you like Ryan Tannehill more in that game, I don't blame you. One name that stands out to me, though, Kirk Cousins, the NFL equivalent of a BLT. He's been on a roll lately, pun intended. Marcus, what are we doing with Kirk Cousins today?
I would start Kirk Cousins. I know, for people who maybe have been rolling with Tom Brady, knowing that he's on a bye, Cousins is a really nice option against the Jaguars. You see that there, 20 or more fantasy points in 3 of the last 4 games. The Jags have their problems stopping quarterbacks. This, between the Jaguars defense and the Vikings sketchy secondary, this might be a sneakily high-scoring game. I would not be surprised. So I like Cousins as a streamer this week.
Okay, well, you like Kirk Cousins. I like Taysom Hill, even though I just said I was a little bit worried about Alvin Kamara because we've seen what's happened there. Because Taysom Hill, he's a quarterback, he's a wide receiver, a tight end, and a running back. But I do like him today against the Atlanta Falcons. When he played them just 2 weeks ago in Week 11, he finished as the QB number 3. He had over 24 fantasy points. He's had 2+ rushing touchdowns in both starts this season. The reality is that the Falcons defense is not so hot. They've allowed the 2nd most fantasy points to quarterbacks this season. They've also allowed a top 5 fantasy quarterback in 5 of the last 11 games. Taysom Hill, we understand that rushing upside, so please fire him up into your lineups, even though he's going to hurt my guy, Alvin Kamara.
Well, let's take a look at the running backs. I don't have Alvin Kamara on this board, but I definitely would start him. Miles Sanders did not have a great game on Monday night, but I love the matchup against the Green Bay Packers. Frank Gore, 17+ touches in each of the last 2 weeks. I love him. Wayne Gallman. Marcus, Wayne Gallman's on this board. I hope you're paying attention. Damian Harris. Antonio Gibson, despite the tough matchup against Pittsburgh, we'll go with him. But let's talk a little bit about the Houston Texans, who've been very generous to opposing running backs this year. How are you feeling about the Colts backfield, Kimmy? Who you looking at?
Yeah, you had him on your board, Rank. This is why I love you. This is why we agree so much. Please, guys, get Nyheim Hines into your starting lineup. Rank already mentioned The Texans defense, they are susceptible to the run. They've allowed the most rushing yards per game to running backs this season. They're also allowing the third most fantasy points to running backs this season. Look at Nyheim Hines. Start him not only because he's good, but because he does backflips as well. The last 3 weeks since week 10, he's had over 18 fantasy points. That's his average. He's also had 4 receptions a game this season, the 7th most against running backs. This is such a good matchup. I have a lot of confidence going in and starting Nyheim Hines. Even though Jonathan Taylor is there as well, Jordan Wilkins, Nyheim Hines is the guy.
I'm going to go David Montgomery here. And the last couple of weeks, we're starting to see the guy that I thought we were going to see last year. But the opportunity has been there. Obviously, with no Tariq Cohen, that has meant more opportunity for Montgomery to touch the football. And he's taken advantage of some good matchups. But last week, it was against the Packers. This week now he's got the Lions, who have been the worst team at stopping fantasy running backs this year. So, and they're even throwing him the ball a little bit more. So that has been kind of encouraging. So I would definitely go with D-Mont this week.
And one thing to note about the Bears, too, is some of their younger kids, guys like Alex Bars, have been playing really well on the offensive line. Hopefully we can see that improvement as well. And as you said, they throw the ball a lot better as well. But let's talk about pass catchers. And let's go to our robust wide receiver list. This is what I do. I give you a lot. Tyler Lockett, I'm going to talk about him later on in the show. I love him this week, and I will tell you, listen, slot receivers against the Giants. I'll just give you I'll give you the cheat sheet right now. A.J. Brown, I think that, again, it goes without saying, but I know a lot of people are looking at the running game. Jarvis Landry also in that game is pretty good. Cooper Kupp and Bobby Trees were great against the Cardinals last season. Get both of those guys dialed up and into your lineup. Of course, Deebo Samuel, Tyler Boyd, a couple other guys that I like. But the Raiders have allowed 5 touchdowns to receivers in their last 4 weeks. Which Jets receiver are we looking at, Marcus?
Jamison Crowder for me, because the Jets love their slot receivers. And it hasn't really mattered who it is, whether it's Sam Darnold or Joe Flacco. I know Darnold is expected to start today. He especially loves to zero in on his slot receivers. And it hasn't even really mattered who it is. I mean, when it's Jamison Crowder, that's the guy. When it was Braxton Berrios, that was the guy. So this is a situation where, I know you had Frank Gore on the board, and I do like that call, but I also think when the Jets go to the air, it's going to be Crowder seeing a lot of those looks.
A guy who I also think is a good start this week is Devontae Parker. The Dolphins are taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, I will say this. I like Devontae Parker more if Ryan Fitzpatrick is the starter, but as we were seeing, Tua looks like he's trending upwards and could play. Now, just last week, Devontae Parker had season-high numbers in targets, receiving yards versus the Jets. 14 targets, 119 receiving yards. I understand that he has a better season average in fantasy points with Fitzmagic as the starting quarterback, but regardless, if Tua does start and does play, this is such a good matchup. The Bengals have allowed the 2nd most receiving touchdowns a game since week 7, so hopefully Parker can get into the end zone and win you some fantasy points.
All right, let's take a look at the fantasy tight ends for this week. This is a pretty stock list. It doesn't really vary. There's not a lot of variation from week to week. Darren Waller, TJ Hawkinson, Evan Ingram, even though he's a great matchup this week. Hunter Henry, Eric Ebron, Dallas Goedert. And I will say this. I know that Zach Ertz could play this week. To me, it doesn't matter. The Eagles run so much 12 personnel. Even if Zach Ertz is in the lineup, I am not fearful of starting Dallas Goedert. I think you got to dial him up. I think you got to get him ready to go. Richard Rodgers is the guy who is going to end up being left out. And that was 15 for 15 presented by Geico. Now, if the fantasy playoffs are a dance, then your opponent is John Lithgow trying to prevent you from getting there. We need a hero. And we also need to explain to Kimmy who Kevin Bacon is and why the original Footloose was better. That and fantasy heroes and villains coming up after the break. Oh my gosh, it's Julio. Oh my God. Julio Jones, still a very good football player. We will talk about him, the Atlanta Falcons, Todd Gurley, Calvin Ridley, all that good stuff. I'm just going to sit here. That should have been in the movie Footloose. They should have figured out a way. You're watching NFL Fantasy Game Day presented by Geico. Here are the stardom defenses for week 13. There's only 3. Listen, you know who you're starting on defense. I do want to take this opportunity, though, to tell you, if the Cleveland Browns are available right now, go pick them up. You're not starting them against the Titans, so settle down, Titan fans. I'm not trying to sully your name or anything, but their playoff schedule, weeks 15 and 16, include the Giants and the Jets. You could not ask for a more favorable schedule. Hey, welcome back to NFL Fantasy Game Day. Adam Rank, Kim Checks, Marcus Grant way over there. You know what? If you got a question for us, hit us up on Twitter at NFL Fantasy. We will answer that. We'll try to answer that for you. Listen, we're human beings. We can only have so much time to do these things. And of course, our pal Michael F. Florio is in the comments section of YouTube where you never want to go, but he's going there today for you. Hit us up at youtube.com/NFL. Let's do some fan tweets. What do you think?
Fire him up.
Sure.
All right. Well, let's go with this one. Gaskin, Dobbins, or Hines, full point PPR. Kimmy, I know you talked about Nyheim Hines. Where would you go with this one?
Nyheim Hines. That's the exact reason. We talked about how susceptible that defense he's going up against today is. I think the second one I like the most out of this would be Myles Gaskin. I would avoid J.K. Dobbins if I could, but Nyheim Hines, full send.
All right. Goff or Cousins, Standard League. Marcus?
I'm going to have to go with Kirk Cousins. Jared Goff has just been too inconsistent for me to consider. I know the Cardinals' defense has been mediocre, but I still go Kirk Cousins here.
All right, we got another one coming through. Tyler Boyd or Denzel Mims, non-PPR. Okay, I would go with Tyler Boyd, especially in a non-PPR. Denzel Mims is a nice sleeper to me. He's been targeted 7 times in each of the last 3 games. So he's a nice option as well. But Tyler Boyd, in this particular one, David, go with him. All right, next. Kyler Murray or Taysom Hill at quarterback. Kimmy, you were talking about Taysom Hill earlier. Which way are you leaning here?
I understand that Kyler Murray is good, but you have to look at what happened last week. He had a dead performance. I'm scared there's still a shoulder situation that could be happening. So Taysom Hill, you know that he's going to rush in at least 2 touchdowns against the Falcons.
All right. Robert Tonyan, Hunter Henry at tight end. Marcus, who are you going with?
I think I'm going to go Henry. I mean, Tonyan is highs and lows. Henry seems to have a little bit of a safer floor, so I would lean toward him.
All right, very good. Continue to hit us up on Twitter at NFL Fantasy. And time now for Fantasy Heroes just for one day. Or,
That's
maybe
David
for
Bowie.
a number of weeks. Who knows? These are players who can carry you into the playoffs. Marcus, why don't you lead us off?
I want to start with Raheem Mostert, and this is a guy that a lot of people waited for to come back. He was dealing with an injury for a while, missed about a month of the season. But now that he's back, we know he's going to get a pretty heavy workload. I've been saying it. We always want a part of a Kyle Shanahan running game. It's the reason that JaMychal Hasty was a thing for a couple of weeks this season, because we know that Kyle Shanahan can scheme him up. So, look, I think regardless of the matchup, we just know that the touches are going to be there. The fact that he's explosive definitely helps. And on top of it, the Bills have been just okay against running backs, so I feel really good about this one.
A guy who we also know is always just going to be there for us, it's Keenan Allen. He's going up today against the New England Patriots. I understand it could be intimidating going up against the Patriots D, but we know how good Keenan Allen plays with Justin Herbert as his starting quarterback. He's having over 11 targets a game this season. That's most amongst wide receivers, as well as second most among wide receivers with receptions, almost 8 receptions a game. He's had over 16 fantasy points in 5 of the last 6 games. He has such a remaining favorable schedule for the rest of the season. Keenan Allen is truly a wide receiver 1.
I'm going to go with Giovanni Bernard. His name is Gio, and he's starting in my lineup. Okay, listen. Okay, not everybody loves Goldfinger. I understand. Listen, here's my thing, though, with Giovanni Bernard. He has had double-digit touches in 6 consecutive games. Oh, it says it right there. How cool. The Dolphins have allowed 15 or more fantasy points to running backs in 2 out of their last 3 games. They allow a lot of rushing yards this season, the 7th most in the NFL. So I love Gio. He's getting an opportunity. So start him this week. But now we need to talk about some of the villains, the guys who are not going to come through for us. Marcus, why are you saying Russell Wilson?
I'm telling you to, because I'm gonna start with an Adam Rank-like preface here, right? Like, don't hit me up telling me that you were worried and so you took Russell Wilson out of your lineup and you streamed Mike Glennon instead. That's not what I'm saying here. I'm telling you, though, to be concerned about Russell Wilson. The Seahawks have not really been letting him cook quite as much. He has not been a 5-star Michelin chef. Do they get 5 stars for Michelin? I have no idea. But
maybe
he's been ordering more takeout a little bit lately, and they've been running the football a little bit more. On top of it, the Giants are better against quarterbacks than you might think. Big Blue has given up the 5th fewest fantasy points to the position. So I get it. You're probably not sitting Russell Wilson, but at least understand that the numbers might not be what you want them to be.
Okay, mine's not as spicy as Russell Wilson. I think mine's probably a little bit more predictable, but it's Matt Ryan. I have no faith with him going up against the Saints today because he's been so volatile all season long. He's finished outside the top 10 quarterback spot in 8 of the last 9 games. Over the last 2 games combined, this is combined, guys, he hasn't even combined for over 10 fantasy points over the last 2 games. He's had fewer than 18 fantasy points in 4 of the last 5 games. This is such a tough matchup. 5 interceptions in the last 4 games combined. Matt Ryan, I've lost faith. We can compare him to food. I feel like he's still Thanksgiving leftovers. He's like that guy who saves the leftovers for 2 weeks and then you get sick. Just don't do it.
Yeah, that's a little bit too much. It's time to empty out the fridge. It's time to empty out your quarterback room and put him on the waiver wire. I'm going to talk a little bit about DeAndre Hopkins, and I think I'm going to be in the same mindset as Marcus was when talking about a big-name player who is probably doesn't have the best matchup. I think that's the thing. He's kind of like one of the members of the Suicide Squad, like Deadshot or something. We're like, is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Like, I don't really know. But the thing is, you can't sit him. I mean, it's just impossible because the opportunity is always going to be there. He is a number 1 wide receiver, but the Rams have allowed the fewest fantasy points to wide receivers this season. They've got Jalen Ramsey. And I know that D-Hop has done well, but he's averaged around 60 yards whenever he's gone up against Jalen Ramsey. So you need a touchdown for him to come through. Again, that's what we're banking on, and that's what we need him to do to come through. But there's a chance that he turns on us. He just brings out the metal folding chair and knocks us right out of the bye week. That's what I'm going for. I'm going for the bye week. Anyways, that was Fantasy Heroes and Villains, and time now for a break. And let me tell you something. Back in August, I'm sure you spent many hours debating which wide receiver you were going to draft in the first round. Was it going to be Michael Thomas? Was it going to be Brandon Cooks? Oh, that's right, you didn't, because that's lunacy. But that's where we're at right now in 2020. We're making that decision. We've got fantasy face-offs coming up next. You're watching NFL Fantasy Game Day presented by Geico. All right, there is Derek Carr, the most disappointing car since, I don't know, Fast and the Furious, Tokyo Drift. I'm joking. That was an underrated movie. But listen, last week is last week. Derek Carr is motivated. He's a girl dad now. Derek Carr is going to rebound this week. I feel very confident in that. So I needed to pick him up. I'm starting him in a couple of places. But let's look at some other notable actives and inactives. Tua Tagovailoa is going to be starting for the Miami Dolphins today against the Cincinnati Bengals. I kind of wanted one more Fitz. Wanted a little bit more Fitz time, but some big name running backs. We got Dalvin Cook. Todd Gurley's playing. David Johnson. Josh Jacobs, Derek's teammate, is not going to be playing, so Devontae Booker could be a nice option for you. Lamar Jackson, of course, is expected to start Tuesday versus the Cowboys. Kenny Golladay is out, but big name wide receivers, Julio Jones, Allen Robinson, Adam Thielen, all active today. So, you know what? I think all of those are must. I know there's a lot of questions, weirdly, about Julio Jones, and I understand, I guess. I don't know. Maybe I don't understand. But anyways, welcome back to NFL Fantasy Game Day, presented by Geico. Rank, checks, Grant. There you go. It's time now to play Fantasy Face-Off, where we put players head-to-head, and we take their faces off. All right, no more for that, man. Let's start at the wide receiver position, and let's go rapid fire. Better start this week, Michael Thomas or Brandon Cooks. Kimmy, where are you going?
Are we really asking this? It's absolutely
We're really
Michael
asking
Thomas.
this.
Way better of a matchup against the Falcons. They're allowing the second most fantasy points this season, and it's Michael Thomas, so Michael Thomas.
All right, fair enough. Chase Claypool versus Washington or Terry McLaurin versus the Steelers. Who do you got, Marcus?
I'm going Scary Terry here. The guy's been nearly matchup proof. He's pretty much quarterback proof. I like Claypool, but I still think that McLaurin is going to see more targets because the Steelers still spread the ball around.
Love that call. Tyler Lockett or Debo this week. Kimmy, where are you going?
I like both of these guys, but Rank, I think we're gonna agree on this one. Tyler Lockett against the Giants. He runs 52% of his routes from the slots. The Giants are horrible against slot receivers. I think DK Metcalf's gonna be a lot more locked up. So please start Tyler Lockett this week.
Yeah, this is a huge Tyler Lockett week. I would agree. Juju versus Washington or Bobby Trees versus the Cardinals. Marcus.
I don't appreciate this Trojan on Trojan violence. I'm actually kidding because I suggested that this was the question we asked. I'm going to go with Robert Woods here in this situation. I mean, like I said, the Steelers will spread the ball around a little bit more. For the Rams, it tends to be the Cup and Woods show. And they do a better job of scheming their guys open into space.
Bobby Trees, 20 combined receptions last year in 2 games against the Arizona Cardinals. Let's go to the flex position. Damian Harris or David Montgomery versus the Lions, Kimmy.
This was a tough one for me, and I was going to swing with Harris, but then I realized David Montgomery was going against the Lions, who are absolutely horrible against the run game. So David Montgomery, even though these guys are really close, in my opinion.
All right. It's not as close as you think. David Montgomery, that's the right call. Frank Gore or Melvin Gordon?
Okay, Bears
I'm
fan.
biased. It's okay. Who do you got, Marcus? Frank Gore or Melvin Gordon?
I'm going with the ageless one, Frank Gore. Go on running eternally. The matchup against the Raiders is too good. And, Rank, you and I have been stumping for Phillip Lindsay all year, so it would seem hypocritical to suddenly go and ride with Melvin Gordon.
Well, at some point you would figure the Broncos want to just start their best running back, but I don't know. Who am I? I don't know. I'm not an NFL coach. All right, Amari Cooper versus the Ravens. Nelly Swag against the Jets. Kimmy, who are you going with?
Did you just make that up? Is that really his nickname, Nelly Swag? I like that.
Marcus and I made that up years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we made that up like last
Thanks
year.
Thanks for not letting me in on the joke, guys. Nelly Swag, though. Way better of a matchup against the Jets. Nelly Swag all the way.
All right, Cooper Kupp versus the Cardinals or Devin Singletary versus the 49ers. Marcus.
Cooper Kupp, because he's allowed to score touchdowns. I keep saying Devin Singletary needs 3 forms of ID to get into the end zone. Cooper Kupp has no such restrictions, so I'm going with him.
Yeah, Cooper Kupp had 2 touchdowns against the Cardinals last year, too. Him and Bobby Trees both did very well against the Cardinals. All right, time now for Fantasy Insurance presented by Geico. Let's talk about some of our favorite sleepers of the week. And Kimmy, why don't you get us started?
Okay, I'm going to do this. This is so corny, but I'm going to do it anyway. Kiki, do you love me? Kiki. I understand it could look like a scary matchup on paper because it's against that Colts defense, but I love Kiki QT so much this week, and I think he could be a sneak sleeper that counts. He's had 20-plus fantasy points in only one of 18 career games, which could seem scary, but the situation on offense has completely changed for the Houston Texans with Will Fuller being completely out of the picture. Deshaun Watson, he's been hot these last few weeks. He has 291 passing yards this season. That's fourth most amongst quarterbacks, excuse me. I think Kiki QT is going to have to get involved if they want to stay competitive and try and win this football game. So Kiki QT, get him in your lineup. Okay, it doesn't rhyme anymore or whatever.
Kiki, Kiki. Will you start from me? That's how we do it.
Did you say that he was a sneaky key option this week? Because you should have, because it was literally right there.
Look at you.
You like that? I'm going to go with Mike Gesicki this week against the Bengals. And I know it has been super frustrating for anybody starting Gesicki. I was one of those people at the start of the year who really had high expectations for him, and he has underperformed significantly. Finally had a touchdown last week against the Jets. I think he can double up and have a touchdown against the Bengals, who have struggled against the tight end position. And maybe, I know people are worried about the passing volume with Tua there versus Ryan Fitzpatrick, but maybe Tua decides to lean on his big tight end and give him a few targets, especially near the end zone.
I'm going to be going with, wait for it, Mitch, by God, Trubisky. He has averaged 26 fantasy points. Thank you. That was appropriate. Yes, he's averaged 26 fantasy points in his last 4 games against the Lions. He's had 3 touchdown passes in all 4 of those contests. The Bears, if they have any pride, will have one of their best games of the season. This is kind of like, he's kind of like the episode 8 of quarterbacks, where if you only watch Star Wars episode 8, it is such a beautiful movie. It is fantastic. It's not really connected to a lot of the other films, especially the other 2 sequels, but it is really a visually stunning movie. And if that was the only one you watch, you'd be like, well, this was great. And if you only watch Mitch Trubisky against the Lions, you would think he was better than Patrick Mahomes. And that was Fantasy Insurance presented by Geico. Still to come, Kyler Murray was terrible last week, like Chris Pratt in Passengers. But will Kyler bounce back this week? The good news, Pratt's follow-up movie was Guardians of the Galaxy 2. So we got that working for us. We'll talk about it next. Kyler, not Chris Pratt movies. Unless, whatever. But anyways, this is NFL Fantasy Game Day presented by Geico. Yeah, there is Tua Tagovailoa, Ryan Fitzpatrick. I wish Ryan Fitzpatrick, if he was wearing like a black leather jacket and just picked up a metal folding chair right there, and then whap, and threw him through the barbershop window like Shawn Michaels back in the day. But no, he's the consummate professional and all that stuff. Hey, welcome back to NFL Fantasy Game Day presented by Geico. I am Adam Rank. That is Kimmy Checks. That is Marcus Grant. We have got some burning questions for Week 13, 1 week away from the playoffs. So let's start with, Kyler Murray. Is he going to have a bounce-back game against the LA Rams? What do you think, Marcus?
Not really. I mean, I worry. Mostly what I worry about is the fact that he's just not running the football the last couple of weeks. And maybe it is that he's protecting that shoulder a little bit, but his rushing totals have dropped drastically, and that has changed his fantasy production. I hope this week he gets back to running. I think the Cardinals know they need him to run a little bit more in order to be successful. But this Rams defense is good. And we talked about, you talked about your concerns with DeAndre Hopkins. It worries me a little bit, so I'm not expecting him to be the Kyler we saw at the start of the year who was in the conversation for MVP.
I agree, Marcus, and I think a lot of people are going to start them, and I'm not going to err against that. I don't think he's going to put up a total dud like he did last week, but I also don't think he's going to be shining like he was in previous games. Like we've already said, the Rams is a very tough matchup. They're allowing the fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks this season. So just understand that Kyler Murray may not have that production that he's had towards the beginning of the season.
The Rams have not allowed a 300-yard passer this entire season. The last person to do it, Kyler Murray, 325 in Week 17 of last year. There's an opportunity there. Let's go to another quarterback, Deshaun Watson, facing the Colts without Will Fuller. Kimmy, how do you feel about this one? Are we scared about Deshaun Watson this week?
No, I understand that the dynamic on offense is going to change without Will Fuller, but you guys just heard me singing about Kiki, QT. So obviously I do have a little bit of faith in his receivers as well. Deshaun Watson is great. He's throwing 291 passing yards this season. That's fourth most against quarterbacks. He's had 31-plus fantasy points in 2 straight games. I understand that the matchup is tougher against the Colts, but I still have confidence in Deshaun Watson.
I still believe also. I'm starting Deshaun Watson here. The guy's been great all year long, and I think the reason we aren't talking more about him, I think in terms of what he's done, is the fact that the Texans have such a poor record this year. But it's not because of anything Deshaun Watson has done wrong. And so I think even without Will Fuller, with Cooks there, we'll see if QT gets involved with the 2 Johnsons. I still have faith that Deshaun can go out and be productive.
Deshaun Watson averaging 24 fantasy points with Will Fuller, 22 without him. So it's not a huge drop-off, although he did have DeAndre Hopkins for a stretch there, but still not a huge drop-off. Another quarterback people are asking about this week is Justin Herbert going up against Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots. Obviously, he's been traditionally tough on rookie quarterbacks. So, Marcus, how concerned are you about Justin Herbert?
Medium level concerned, not concerned enough that I would sit him if I have him on my roster. I mean, unless you have, somehow you have Patrick Mahomes or something like that, which I guess is possible. But I have a little bit of worry just because, as you mentioned, Bill Belichick seems to be great at scheming against rookie quarterbacks, but Justin Herbert has not played like your average rookie this year. So I think with that sort of in mind, the fact that they've got Austin Eckler back and this battle station is pretty much as operational as it's going to get this year, I feel okay about having him in the lineup.
Yeah, you should. You're making the argument as to why you should be concerned 0%. Who cares about Bill Belichick's record against quarterbacks? Justin is not your average rookie quarterback. He's had 2+ passing touchdowns in 7 of the last 8 games. He's averaging over 300 passing yards per game. That's the second most in the NFL, only probably behind Patrick Mahomes. I don't know. I got to check on that one. But Justin Herbert is not just a rookie quarterback. He is an incredible NFL quarterback, and I have absolutely no worry starting him against the Patriots.
I mean, he went on the road to Buffalo last week, had over 300 passing yards, and if not for the poor choices at the end of the game, we were owed a garbage time touchdown right there. So hopefully Justin Herbert will get it back today. Now, coming up, our starts and sits of the week. We will go through every position and get you set up. And over the next couple of minutes, I will make a decision on whether or not Fantasy Florio will be able to drop by and hang out with us because he's not wearing floral. He knows what the deal is, although, you know what? At the same time, we'll answer some fan questions. You're watching NFL Fantasy Game Day presented by Geico. There is Colts backup quarterback Phillip Rivers. Oh, I'm sorry. What am I supposed to think when Jacoby Brissett is sitting there stealing all those touchdowns? I'm just happy that people weren't trying to make flex Jacoby Brissett happen. Where was that outrage? Where was the Twitter mob coming after that? Phillip Rivers, actually a pretty good start this week. You were looking to stream a quarterback. I don't know. Maybe you have Tom Brady. But guess what? Time now for 15 minutes to kickoff, presented by Geico. Here are the notable actives and inactives. Clyde Edwards-Helaire tonight is going to be a game-time decision. We will not have Josh Jacobs, nor will we have DeAndre Swift this week, but some big-name running backs who will be joining us: Dalvin Cook, Todd Gurley, and David Johnson. On the quarterback front, Matthew Stafford, active against the Bears. Tua Tagovailoa, active against the Bengals. Lamar Jackson, expected to be active against the Cowboys on Tuesday. Let's take a look at the next board. There we go. Kenny Golladay will not be playing with a hip injury. He's been out for a couple of weeks now, but we do get some big-name receivers back. Julio Jones is active and ready to go, as is Allen Robinson, a late addition to the injury report this week, but he is active with a knee injury. And Adam Thielen has returned to that potent Vikings offense. That's right. I heard what I said. Potent Vikings offense. And that was 15 minutes to kickoff, presented by Geico. Adam Rank, Kim Chex, Marcus Grant, and joining us right now, I've made the magnanimous decision, is Michael F. Florio. How you doing, Michael?
I'm good. I didn't wear floral because it's December. It felt like a sweater day, but it's like a green, so like that's close enough, right?
It's 13 degrees out right here, so it's getting warm, so chill out. It would have been fine, but you did a great job answering all those questions. Before we get to that, though, Marcus, Kimmy, who do you think, I should say, was the most asked about player this morning?
I want to say maybe Alvin Kamara, just because a lot of people are in must-win situations to try to get into the fantasy playoff, and this whole Taysom Hill situation has kind of muddied the waters for Alvin Kamara's production, maybe?
That's a good call. I'm gonna go with a different guy in that same game. Noted Falcons wide receiver Quintorris Lopez-Jones. Because I've had a lot of questions about him in my own mentions, so I'm guessing a lot of folks had a lot of questions in the fantasy comment section too.
Both of those were good guesses. Got a lot of questions about both of those players, but it wasn't the most asked player. In fact, that was Dolphins running back Myles Gaskin. A lot of people are wondering what to do with him now, and I pretty much told people to start him. I have him ranked as my RB11 this week. So unless you have, you were debating between him and one of my top 10 running backs, I was probably telling you to go Gaskin, because with Tua back and then missing other running backs there, I think they're going to be running the ball more today, and I think it's just going to be a lot of Gaskin all day.
Wait, hold on. Let me pull up Giovanni Bernard, Antonio Gibson, or I don't know. Who? Myles Gaskin above any of those guys?
I have him above Gio, not above Gibson, though. Gibson has just been playing so well.
All right. Well, I selfishly asked the question. Let's get some fan questions in here and kind of go and see what the fans need to know for this week. See, my picture looks perfect right here. This is the shot. This is the shot right here. But a good problem to have. Thielen versus the Jags, Mostert versus the Buffalo Bills. Michael, which way would you go with this problem?
I would go with Adam Thielen. Like, I like both of these options. It is definitely a good problem to have, but Adam Thielen has just been balling out all year, and he has a great matchup against the Jaguars, who give up a ton of fantasy points, so I'd go with him.
All right, next question coming to us. J.D. McKissick or Latavius Murray? Marcus, which way would you go?
I'd go Latavius here because, as Florio mentioned, Gibson's playing so well, then McKissick's opportunities have been lessened. Meanwhile, Latavius Murray's getting a lot more opportunity the last couple of weeks, so I would lean on him.
All right. Start David Montgomery or Miles Sanders with Jordan Howard activated. This is a standard scoring league. Kim, which way would you go?
I'm going to go with your guy, David Montgomery. We had high expectations last week for Miles Sanders because the matchup was there, and he just hasn't been able to deliver. David Montgomery has such a good matchup against the Lions. I'm going to rock with him today.
All right, final question. Gurley or Giovanni Bernard, half-point PPR. I'm going to go with Gio in this instance. Todd Gurley is a touchdown-dependent running back going against a team that does not allow a lot of touchdowns. Gio for me, even though now I got to go bench him for Myles Gaskin if I can go through and make that choice. Okay, Well, those are the fan questions, and it's time now for Sunday Funday! All right, let's play. Yeah. Hey, Michael F. Florio, which player is going to pop off this week? Is going to be today's top scorer? Who do you got?
This time is the charm because I think I've picked him the last 2 weeks and he hasn't come through. But it's Dalvin Cook. There's no Alexander Madison this week, so I think it's gonna just be the Dalvin Cook show. Even though last week we got a little bit worried if he was fully healthy or not. And the Jaguars, they just give up a bunch of fantasy points regardless of position, but especially to running backs. And we've seen it this year that when Minnesota gets a lead, they are not afraid to just heavily rely on Dalvin Cook. So I expect a lot of work for him in the second half. I think he finds the end zone a couple times, and he is the top scorer today.
You know who found the end zone a couple of times last week and will probably be able to do it again this week against the Broncos? It's Tyreek Hill. He's coming off of a game in Week 12 where he had 57.9 fantasy points. This is most by an NFL player since 2013. It's a fun rival division game. The Broncos aren't playing so well. Their defense is banged up. It's a home game for the Chiefs. Tyreek Hill is the freak that we all know. He's an incredible athlete, an incredible fantasy wide receiver. I think he's going to go back-to-back weeks as the number one fantasy scorer.
Florio talked about Adam Thielen just a bit ago and his expectations, and I think he's going to have a huge day against that Jacksonville secondary. And yeah, look, Thielen is a guy who can score in bunches, and he is good for one of those big, huge blow-up games. I think it comes this week against the Jaguars. Wouldn't be surprised if he gets about 120 yards and a couple of touchdowns. I think big things are coming his way.
Yeah, I like Adam Thielen a lot of this game, too. I am going to go with Nick Chubb. I do believe that the Browns are going to try to establish the run this week against the Tennessee Titans. I know Marcus talked about this earlier this week where he made the bold prediction that all three of these Browns, the two Browns running backs and Derrick Henry were all going to get 100 scrimmage yards. I'm thinking the same thing. I think this is going to be a huge game for Nick Chubb. Let's move on to the quarterback position, though. Kim, what quarterback is going to be the must start of the week?
Deshaun Watson, I was hyping him up earlier. I was trying to hype up Kiki QT and his receiving core. And I really do think it's Deshaun. He's been playing such good football. Since week 6, he's had 15 passing touchdowns and 0 interceptions. Now, I understand that Will Fuller's not there, but he still does have Brandon Cooks. He has Kiki QT. David Johnson is now playing again today. He also can get involved in the passing game. He is averaging over almost 300 passing yards per game this season. That's 4th most amongst quarterbacks. I think he's a must start and an easy guy to help get me into the fantasy playoffs.
Deshaun is an excellent start, I think, this week, even against the Colts. I'm going to go with Cam Newton, and he has been uneven this year. It hasn't been as exciting as maybe we want it to be, but I do think this is a good opportunity against a Chargers defense that has struggled. I mean, some of it, obviously, not having Derwin James this year has had something to do with it, but they have had their issues. I'm curious to see if Cam runs the football a little bit more because that raises his floor, but I still think he's going to be steady enough and do enough that he'll have a pretty good fantasy day.
I hope so, Marcus, because I'm starting him in a league. And speaking of uneven quarterbacks, Josh Allen has been up and down this year, but I think you can start him. He has one game with less than 15 fantasy points, so he comes with such a safe floor each week. And then we've seen his ceiling is well over 30, so even in a tough matchup, we know that when they get near the goal line, they'll let him run. He's been throwing multiple passing touchdowns basically every week, so I think you could still start Josh Allen and don't get scared by the matchup on Monday night.
No, I agree with you. I like Josh Allen, and I like Kirk Cousins. I know he is like going to a Mexican restaurant and ordering a quesadilla, the most boring item on the menu. But you know what? It's always delicious, and it's always good, and it never lets you down. And Kirk Cousins has scored 20 fantasy points in 3 out of his last 4 games. He's had multiple touchdowns in those games. He's passing for over 300 yards. And really, we got to give a hat tip to this Vikings defense for not being good anymore, which has kind of forced Cousins to throw the football similar to what we did with Russell Wilson earlier in the season. Let's go to the running back position. Marcus, what running back is a must start for today?
I'm re-upping with Miles Sanders this week. Maybe it's because I've liked him all year long. Maybe it's because I just really like the matchup against the Green Bay Packers. The Packers have struggled against opposing running backs all season. And part of it is when we talk about this Eagles offense, the one thing that comes up is Carson Wentz and his struggles, and inevitably somebody says the phrase Carson Wentz is broken. And maybe that is the case. If he is, that seems like more of a reason to lean on your stud running back. They keep wanting to spread things around, get Boston Scott involved, Corey Clement occasionally comes in. At some point, I'm just waiting for Doug Peterson to say, hey, you know, that guy wearing number 26 is really good. Maybe we should give him about 20 touches and see what happens. I think if there's any week to do it, this is the week against Green Bay.
I mean,
Michael, how about Austin Eckler?
I like Austin Eckler. I like Austin Eckler this week as well. I think he is a must start each week. And last week he gave you 16 targets, 11 catches, 85 yards. Those are wide receiver 1 numbers that you're getting out of your running back. With Justin Herbert this year, he's averaging over 10 targets and nearly 9 catches per game. You could see the bobblehead behind me of him playing the air guitar. That's the one thing we've been missing is we need him to get the end zone, find the end zone, and start doing that air guitar. But I think Austin Eckler is a top 5 running back that you can start each week.
All systems are a go on this Chargers offense. They're going to be really darn good next season. I'm going to double down, triple down on David Montgomery. I love this matchup against the Lions. He's having almost 18 touches a game this season. That's 14th most against the running backs. Reality is that the Lions aren't great against the run game. They've allowed the most fantasy points to running backs this season, as well as 21 scrimmage touchdowns to running backs, most in the NFL. David Montgomery is an absolute must-start.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. And Giovanni Bernard, we just talked about a moment ago. Apparently, I'm benching him for Myles Gaskin. Was that who I had? Like, I have that on the rundown that it's supposed to be Giovanni Bernard. Michael, let me ask you this. Okay, listen. We're only worried about my team. So I put in Giovanni Bernard in the flex spot over Tyler Boyd. Is that the right thing to do?
I think so. With Brandon Allen at the quarterback, I would go with the 2 running backs.
All right, so I feel good. And by the way, that team has Christian McCaffrey and Josh Jacobs. That's how stacked this team is. I don't know how. I'm still fighting for the top spot. Anyways, let's go to the wide receiver position. Florio, what wide receiver is a must start this week?
Yeah, you've heard Marcus and Kimmy talking up Deshaun Watson today, and I think his number 1 wide receiver now is a must start in Brandon Cooks. Listen, it's awful what has happened to Will Fuller. I'm feeling that pain very hard. I have him in a lot of leagues, but that leaves a lot of targets and a lot of air yards up for grabs there. And we could get excited about Kiki QT and their other weapons there, but they already have a true proven top option here in Brandon Cooks. And I think with Will Fuller being out, it's just going to lead to more opportunity for him. So I think Brandon Cooks is someone that you have to start now with Will Fuller out the rest of the season.
Okay, I like that pick in Brandon Cooks, but I also love Justin Jefferson today against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I know that Adam Thielen is healthy, and he is now returned after coming off of the COVID-19 list, but I really do think that him and Justin Jefferson could work in tandem. We understand that Jacksonville have allowed the 5th most receiving yards to wide receivers this season. They're also allowing top 15 fantasy wide receivers in 5 straight games. Kirk Cousins, who Adam Rank was hyping earlier, he's also playing incredible football. I think there's an opportunity for both of these guys to have a huge fantasy day. So I am rocking with the rookie, Justin Jefferson, today.
Staying in the division, and I'm going to go Allen Robinson as a must-start this week. We have talked multiple times in this show about Trubisky and how he pretty much has dominated the Lions. Don't really know why, but this is what it is. And so if Trubisky is going to ball out, chances are it's because his number 1 wide receiver has a really good game. It's nice that he's active. We know he's going to go. So, look, as long as Allen Robinson's starting for the Bears, I don't really care who the quarterback is. He's starting for me.
Yeah, he's been good. And if you've been watching the Bears games, man, his players are getting schemed open. And Mitch sometimes just doesn't make the throw. But a guy who has no problem making the throws is Russell Wilson. And it's one of the reasons why I love Tyler Lockett this week. Now, obviously, DK Metcalf likely to be shadowed by James Bradbury, which is fine. We're still starting DK. We're not going to be sweating that at all. But we do love Tyler Lockett this week. 52% of his snaps have come from the slot. The Giants have allowed 5 touchdown receptions to slot receivers this season. They've allowed the 10th most fantasy points to slot receivers this season. So this is going to be the game. I know it's been uneven with Tyler Lockett this season, but this is the week that you dial him up and you get him ready to go. Let's go to the tight end position. And Kimmy, which tight end is a must start?
Let's rock with Evan Ingram going up against the Seahawks today. Now, the tight end position, it's tough, right? We understand. But I want to rock with Evan Ingram.
Yeah, I like TJ Hawkinson here. He has scored double-digit fantasy points in 5 of his last 6 games, and that's basically what you need to be a tight end 1 nowadays.
I'm going to go with Big Bob Tunyon because, look, it's tight end, man. It's like a dart throw, but Tunyon has a high ceiling even if the floor is scary low. All you need is for him to catch maybe one long pass and a touchdown, and you're feeling great.
I like Dallas Goedert in this one. And I know a lot of people are concerned because there's a possibility that Carson Wentz is going to be coming back and going to be the tight end there. But you know what? The Philadelphia Eagles run so much 12 personnel that to me, it really doesn't matter. And I think that both of them have the opportunity. Florio, am I wrong for starting Dallas Goedert, even with if Zach Ertz is there?
I don't think so. Carson Wentz throws to the tight end more than any other quarterback this year, so there's room for both of them.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of guys. There's a lot of guys I feel nervous about that, but I think that with Dallas Goedert, I think you're just going to be fine and ready to go. Hey, thank you, everybody who have been checking us out all season long. We're on the cusp of the playoffs. Good luck to everybody. This is NFL Fantasy Game Day presented by Geico. We'll see you in the playoffs next week.